cameras, there have been concerns that the action camera market is saturated. Sony, Xiaomi, Polaroid, there's a better camera on the iPhone. How is that impacting your expectations with the Hero 5 in the session?
Well, the truth is that sell-through at retail, consumers' rate of purchasing GoPro from Best Buy, Target, Walmart, your local surf shop, ski shop, bike shop, the rate that people are buying GoPro has never been better. So when people say that demand for GoPro is waning and that the market is saturating, we just don't see that in our business. And this is consumers buying Hero 4s that are 2 years old. So when you consider how much better Hero 5 is, the fact that a Hero 5 camera can now auto-upload your photos and videos to the cloud, it's got incredible image stabilization built into the camera itself. There's so many additional benefits to the user that we think that they're only going to buy Hero 5 that much more frequently than they're buying Hero 4 today. So we're feeling really good about it.
We're also seeing new phones that shoot 4K video. They're water resistant, which has been a huge selling point of the GoPro. Does that make you worry at all about more cannibalization?
No, because video resolutions are important, but it's a tech spec, speed and feed. What a consumer is really after when they buy a GoPro, or any camera for that matter, is they're really thinking about the story that they can share. And that's what's so exciting about the new products and services we announced today, is that GoPro is now an end-to-end storytelling solution. It's not enough just to enable the capture of great moments. GoPro now enables people to automatically upload those moments to the cloud so that they can access them on their phone, and using our quick mobile app, quickly create a story that they can share. GoPro's not just a camera company anymore, we're a storytelling solutions company.
There was a lot of buzz around GoPro as a media company during the IPO, and that seems to have cooled down. Is that still your strategy, or are you pulling back on that a little bit?
Our vision remains the same, which is that as we enable people to more regularly capture and share great stories, so grows our opportunity as an entertainment company. GoPro really is a brand by the people for the people, and we think our prospects in entertainment are directly linked to that. When we do our job, reach our primary vision of helping people capture and share great stories, which I think we unveiled that solution today, then the result of that is our customers capture and share so much more compelling content at much larger volumes, and then we can aggregate the best of those stories and redistribute those as GoPro entertainment. So the vision remains the same.
GoPro is often talked about, got to ask you this question, Nick, about a potential acquisition target, that Google might be interested, Apple, Sony. Is this something that you've given thought to?
Not a lot. I mean, we've got a terrific vision for the company. If there was an opportunity that dramatically helped us accelerate our vision and realize GoPro on some massively larger scale than we were able to alone, that might be something that's interesting, but we're doing such a great job of executing against our vision ourselves. We're very excited about the future as a standalone company.
So talk to us a little bit about your IP portfolio. How many of your products are patented, and how do you think about IP in general?
IP is extremely important, and we have got a really robust program. We're filing more and more patents every year. It's something that a few years ago we were light on, and as we look towards the future and recognize how important patent protection was going to be, we invested heavily, and we're very proud about the momentum that we're making. We've got some incredibly smart people that are inventing some incredible solutions at GoPro.
Nick, software has been a big kink for GoPro. Obviously, you're unveiling this cloud storage service today, but what else are you doing to address that?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again?
I wanted to talk a little bit about software, because this has been a bit of a kink in the chain for GoPro, and I wonder what you're doing to address that.
Oh, well, we've done it. We've dramatically improved leadership of our software teams and built out teams that are capable of realizing the vision that we have for software, and that is helping people make an edit in minutes or seconds versus hours. We're really trying to eliminate the computer, the desktop computer, from the editing equation. We realize that our customers want to capture an experience, and then they want to be able to edit that experience on their phone and then move on with their lives. And I think, as you saw today, the fact that GoPros can now auto offload to the cloud, and we also have a quick key SD card reader for phones that lets you move your content over to your phone really quickly, and then with the Quick app, in just seconds, produce a really compelling video. I think we've done it, and it's something we're really proud of, so I don't think software is going to be a problem for GoPro moving forward.
And last quick question, Nick. Do you see future applications for GoPro in capturing live footage of, let's say, basketball or football games? That seems like it could be a huge opportunity for GoPro. If you see that as an opportunity, how big do you think that opportunity could be?
Well, we actually are today already enabling some of the most exciting live perspectives in television, thanks to HeroCast, which is a live broadcast solution that we've developed that attaches to a Hero camera and provides live perspectives from an athlete's helmet or from their chest while they're in skiing competition or what have you, band on stage. So HeroCast is enabling that today, and it's terrific for our brand.
GoPro CEO Nick Woodman there speaking to us after the new products unveiling in Tahoe. One stock we are watching, shares of the network control company Infoblox surge more than 15% in Monday trading after announcing it will be bought by the private equity firm Vista Partners. Shareholders are getting cash valued at a 33% premium to Infoblox's average closing price over the last 2 months. The deal ends a tumultuous journey for the company this year. In April, activist firm Starboard Value disclosed a 7% stake in the company. Then in June, it received an unsolicited takeover offer from Thoma Bravo and hired Morgan Stanley for activist defense soon after. Now to our tech revolving door. Intel has tapped private equity veteran Bob Swan as its new CFO. He will take over the role from Stacy Smith, who had already moved into running operations and sales. Swan comes from General Atlantic, where he was an operating partner. He was also previously CFO of eBay for 9 years. Shares of Intel rose in after-hours trading on this news. And coming up, Oracle is doubling down on the cloud, proclaiming, quote, Amazon's lead is over. Our interview with co-CEO Mark Hurd next. Plus, later this hour, the Obama administration gets set to share its vision for self-driving car regulation. But will Google, Uber, and Tesla find it helpful or stifling? We will discuss. This is Bloomberg. Oracle's Open World is underway in San Francisco, where the company is making a big bet on the cloud. Oracle made a slew of announcements Sunday that help position it to compete with Amazon's cloud business, with co-founder Larry Ellison proclaiming, quote, Amazon's lead is over. Our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, spoke to Oracle CEO Mark Hurd earlier about why the company is making this push to the cloud.
Because of cloud now, we get a chance to go into what you might traditionally think of the mid-market or small and medium business that we would never have had the opportunity to go into back in the traditional on-premise world. You've got these companies now that have the opportunity to get the best and most advanced technology in the world with no IT staff. They don't need hardware. They don't need software on-premise. They don't need a data center. So now some of the companies you even see around us here that I'm sure the viewers can't see, you know, Pandora, Lyft, etc., that really have started with the same technologies as the most sophisticated companies in the world straight out of the cloud.
It's interesting, too, that, you know, you talked a lot in the conference call about infrastructure as a service, about having your own cloud system. But that puts you in competition with some people like Microsoft, Google, Amazon. What do you offer there that, you know, puts you head-to-head with those guys?
Well, first, Corey, our strategy for the last several years has been to build a whole suite of capabilities.
Right.
Starting at the application layer, what's called usually times SaaS, supplemented by a platform. Platform to us is everything from database to authoring tools, everything that's really not an app or infrastructure.
Right.
And we're now in this show really highlighting our infrastructure capabilities. And for us, that means better performance, better security than anybody on the planet.
What does it mean for margin? I mean, that's a business where the margins are kind of opaque because nobody really breaks it out, with maybe the exception of Rackspace or something. They've got a different model. But what does it mean for margin? You know, Oracle's had this joy of software margins for so long. Right. What does it mean?
Right. Well, the great thing is the major supplier to our cloud is ourselves. So we really have a whole set of capabilities that range from processing capabilities, databases, operating systems. And so our margins, we believe, in infrastructure are just as good as they are across the rest of our business.
So you think you hold margin there? Because that would be one place where you'd expect competitors might try to
There's a little bit of the issue in cloud is you have to invest before you get revenue. So if you went back like even 2 years, our margins in our what we call our SaaS PaaS business, software as a service and platform as a service, were, I don't know, 39% 2 years ago. We predicted that they would start to move towards 80.
Right.
In the last quarter, we were at 62.
Right.
And the reason they were 39 was we'd invested in a lot of data centers up front, sort of like the hotel business. You build a hotel before you can rent a room. Similar in the cloud business, you put a lot of capital in, and then as you scale, margins go up.
And yet, it seems like revenue recognition has been kind of consistent for on-prem and cloud, that you haven't had a big. You've seen some other companies and other spaces have big adjustments where they're not getting the revenues up front. It's been really bumpy.
Not well for us in Q1, which we just closed.
Right.
As you mentioned, our cloud revenue plus our license business together grew 16%. So, and that's really the way to look at it, the combination of the two together.
And what does it mean for maintenance long term? I mean, is the cloud, you know, you guys have had such a great maintenance revenue stream, again, high margin business. The cloud business tends to have less maintenance with it. And I wonder what that means as you look out at the future of Oracle.
So many of our customers, if they have a support contract today and said, I'm now going to take, let's use an application as an example, I'm now going to use that application in the cloud. A couple of things would happen. We're now doing more for the customer. We're providing hardware. We're providing all of the infrastructure, the data center, the staff. So actually our support revenue would go up.
Okay.
And so it would go higher because of the additional services we're now doing for the customer. And then the margins would be reflected in that SaaS PaaS margin line, that 62 in Q1 headed towards the 80 that I also described earlier.
Mark Benioff, who works right down the street at a company called Salesforce, when he's looking at your NetSuite acquisition, suggested you were buying growth with an acquisition, which you've done a bunch of acquisitions. Salesforce has done a few too. I wonder, particularly as it relates to NetSuite, I mean, how do you look at buy it over build it? How do you make that kind of decision?
Well, we do both. I mean, right now our R&D is in excess of $5 billion. I want to add, R&D spending isn't always the best indicator of yield. I think the best thing about Oracle is that at a show like this, what you've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is the yield for R&D is so exciting about the number of products. We've rewritten all of our software over the last 7 to 8 years, and it's all come out of our R&D. We don't build everything, and we have a pretty good mapping of what we build and then what we can go to the market and then supplement our R&D with, and that's what we do.
Now, the NetSuite deal, T-Row has come out and said they didn't like the price that you've offered. I think in a world where you've got other companies getting 10-for-1 voting preferences, or you've got companies buying companies run by the cousins of the CEO, you guys have done this laudable thing where Larry has stepped away and said, I'm not going to vote my shares. I want the majority outside shareholders to vote for NetSuite. The problem is T-Row Price said we want more money. How high are you willing to go? How do you make that kind of decision?
We're in the middle of that process right now, and that's probably where I'll end it. I mean, we've cleared all the regulatory hurdles except the U.S. Once we do that, we'll begin the tender.
All right. As you look forward, do you think there are a lot more deals to be done out there for Oracle in terms of acquisitions?
I mean, we go through a filter with every acquisition we do. Does it make strategic sense to us? Does it make financial sense to us? Is it a business that we can actually run and operate thoughtfully and professionally? So we go through all of those filters. I never get into any prognostication on M&A opportunities, other than our history is probably the best predictor of our future behavior.
It's an illustrious one indeed.
That was our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, with Oracle co-CEO Mark Hurd at Oracle Open World in San Francisco. And tomorrow, we'll be talking to Oracle's other co-CEO, Safra Catz, 2:30 p.m. New York time, 7:30 p.m. in London. Now to a story we are watching. Google is pushing further into the online travel market with a new app called Google Trips. The app automatically pulls details about a user's trip from their Gmail account and recommends restaurants and local attractions based on data from other travelers. It positions Google in more direct competition with review apps like Yelp and TripAdvisor, but draws the line at actually being able to book anything from within the app. Those lucrative transactions remain in the realm of Expedia and Priceline. Tomorrow on Bloomberg, do not miss our conversation with the CEO of Nutonomy. As Uber rolls out its self-driving fleet in Pittsburgh, this company is testing a rival service on the streets of Singapore. Up next, drone flying with the flick of your wrist. This gesture control armband has just picked up some big tech backers. Details on today's funding board next. This is Bloomberg. On today's funding board, Thalmic Labs has just scored $120 million in new funding from Amazon, Intel, Fidelity Investments, and other backers. The Canadian startup makes an armband that interprets electrical signals in arm muscles to allow users to play games, fly drones, or swipe through articles, hands-free. The investment from Amazon came from a fund that focuses on tools that could work alongside its Alexa voice-controlled home assistant. The funding fits into a larger trend of major tech companies pressing deeper into augmented and virtual reality, where computer projections and headsets blur the line between human and computer interaction. Another story we're watching, tech industry veterans in Seattle want to ban human drivers from a 150-mile stretch of Interstate 5. Instead, they'd like to see that highway between Seattle and Vancouver as a testing ground for driverless cars. Amazon board member Tom Alberg and former Microsoft exec Craig Mundy are unveiling the plan at a cross-border innovation conference on Monday. They suggest phasing it in over a decade, starting with allowing self-driving cars in carpool lanes and moving up to allowing only self-driving cars on the highway, during peak travel periods. Coming up, EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager comes to Washington, and U.S. highway regulators prepare to release highly anticipated guidelines on autonomous cars. We will greet the week next. And if you like Bloomberg, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are weighing in on the weekend bombings in New York and New Jersey and the stabbing rampage at a mall in Minnesota.
These attacks and many others were made possible because of our extremely open immigration system, which fails to properly vet and screen the individuals or families coming into our country.
We know that a lot of the rhetoric we've heard from Donald Trump has been seized on by terrorists, in particular ISIS, because they are looking to make this into a war against Islam.
More than 800 immigrants from so-called special interest countries have been ordered deported or removed after being granted U.S. citizenship by mistake. That's according to a report from the Department of Homeland Security. Incomplete fingerprint records at both the DHS and the FBI resulted in the error. The United States says it's prepared to extend the truce in Syria despite a declaration by Syria's military that it's over. Secretary of State John Kerry says humanitarian aid deliveries to parts of the country are picking up and that the agreement needs more time. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Monday here in New York, 8:30 Tuesday morning in Sydney. I'm joined by my colleague Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. We'll start, as always, in New Zealand, which has been trading for 30 minutes so far on Tuesday, and it's looking very flat, currently off by just a single point. Nikkei futures are looking pretty mixed at the moment, and we're expecting a flat open here on the ASX as well. And we are expected to open on the ASX this morning. Monday was a real mess. The open was delayed by 90 minutes, and then the exchange ended up closing early as well. A hardware issue saw a knock-on technical impact down the line, and very little trading took place. The ASX itself was among the biggest movers, off 2.4%. The exchange has apologised to traders for the disruption. It really couldn't have come at a worse time, because traders here, of course, positioning themselves ahead of those crucial policy meetings from the Bank of Japan and the US Fed. When we do get up and running, though, we are expecting TPG Telecom to be out with full-year results, a $364 million profit expected there. And later today, the Reserve Bank of Australia will release the minutes of its September meeting. Rates were kept on hold at 1.5%. The new governor, Philip Lowe, is juggling an unusual picture of strong growth, weak inflation and underemployment. That's some of what we're watching around the region today. I'm Paul Allen for Bloomberg TV in Sydney, Australia.
Bloomberg West, I'm Emily Chang. It is time to greet the week and dive into the tech stories that are front and center in the days ahead. First up, Apple, still top of mind this week, with the U.S. Senate Finance Committee reaffirming its opposition to an EU order that Apple pay nearly $15 billion in unpaid taxes because of an alleged sweetheart deal with Ireland. The committee says the EU failed to build the case that Ireland gave Apple illegal state aid, saying the ruling, quote, ran roughshod over the iPhone maker. These comments come as the EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager meets U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew in Washington. Lew has also been publicly critical of this ruling. Here with me now to discuss, Bloomberg Senior Executive Editor for Global Tech, Brad Stone, and our Bloomberg News reporter, Alex Webb, who covers Apple. So first of all, what do we know about this meeting between the Treasury Secretary and Margaret Vestager?
Well, pretty much all that they've said in a press release. And they say that they, as you said, did not make the case effectively that this was illegal state aid provided to Apple by the Irish government. I don't think it's any great surprise they come to that conclusion, because any tax which Apple has to pay in Europe, it then does not have to pay when it repatriates any money, bring it back to the US. So the US, it's not that it doesn't want Apple to pay tax, it just wants it to pay tax here.
An interesting exchange on Twitter between the commissioner herself, as we understand it, and an asset manager who tweeted at her saying, Apple, so in the USA there are 185 CEOs which think it's legal to pay 0.05% taxes in Europe. Vestager, please check what they pay ASAP. And she responds, I will. And I keep thinking about all the CEOs who just make sure that their companies do pay taxes. They exist too.
Well, once again, international politics being litigated on Twitter. But look, I mean, what she's saying there is that this isn't an Apple issue. It's not really even a U.S. technology issue. I mean, all American companies have gotten very clever in the last couple of decades at minimizing their tax burden in Europe. I mean, this is what they do. They either forge unique relationships with countries like Ireland, as Apple has done. Maybe it's Luxembourg, as Amazon and Google have done. They're very great at creating stateless entities where they just funnel all their revenue into a shell company that has no employees and sometimes pay no tax. They're not breaking their laws, right? They're exploiting loopholes. And the question is it incumbent on these companies to maybe like act against their own self-interest and pay the tax, or do the countries themselves need to rationalize their statutes?
So what other companies could we be talking about here? Google obviously has several different issues going on in Europe, and there's talk about taking on Facebook's WhatsApp and Skype, which is owned by Microsoft.
And it's not restricted to tech companies, one should say. There's also Starbucks in there, and McDonald's is another one. The FT came up with a calculation that McDonald's owed $500 million in taxes in one particular country. Now, that was the FT's calculation. One can't possibly gauge how accurate that is. In the tech world, I mean, anyone who's particularly in Ireland is interesting. One difference you do have to make between Apple and the others is that Apple's deal with Ireland wasn't that it was paying low tax, which was Ireland's tax rate. It had a one-off agreement with the country. And as far as we know, exactly, 0.05%, I think it was something like that. And as far as we know, this might not be the case, but as far as we know, there aren't any others which have that such.
And what about Google? Google,
certainly.
Lots of different situations.
Yeah, they're minimizing their tax burden. The financial companies, I mean, Chase and JP Morgan, and almost every American company operating in Europe has some form of tax minimization strategy, as you would expect them to do.
All right, well, we'll be watching for any headlines out of that meeting with the Treasury Secretary. I do want to move on to cars. Interesting post coming from John Zimmer, the CEO of Lyft, about ushering the era of self-driving cars, saying that the majority of Lyft rides will be in self-driving cars by 2021. This, of course, on the heels of Uber putting the first self-driving car on the road.
And probably not coincidental that he lays out his vision only a week after Uber has made their announcement in Pittsburgh.
But how feasible is his plan?
I mean, we'll see, right? Everybody's divided. I mean, 5 years, it seems a little aggressive to me. And of course, how Lyft will get there is the big question. I mean, Uber has gone out and spent $680 million plus for a company like Otto. They've hired folks from Carnegie Mellon. Lyft has an arrangement with General Motors, right? We'll see how effective the traditional Detroit automakers are at pioneering self-driving cars. They've got to report to Wall Street, every quarter, so they have a little bit less flexibility. I guess he lays out a tremendous vision. I'm curious what Alex thinks, and he talks about re-engineering cities. But how do companies like Lyft and GM get there when they're competing against not only Uber but a Google that has limitless resources?
He even takes a swipe at Tesla, and Elon's plan for sharing Teslas.
I think there's a certain irony in him taking a swipe at Tesla when he's using the Elon playbook to hype up his company's potential. We've seen Ford talking about they're going to have an autonomous vehicle on the roads, potentially in ride-sharing capacities by 2021. So in some ways, one might expect it's a kind of call for potential partners to come and team up with Lyft. We've had a lot of words coming out of Lyft. Our colleague Eric Newcomb has done a lot on this, on their attempts to find new partners, to find new investment. I wouldn't be surprised if you place it in the context of this announcement that they're looking to people and saying, please, we'd love to use some of your technology.
Right, Brad, what's the latest on that? I mean, we know that they've been shopping around.
We don't know. I mean, we think they're fundraising, and they've talked to a lot of strategic partners and probably acquirers, and no deal has happened.
We're also expecting some new guidelines from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration around self-driving cars. We don't know what exactly will be in them, but we expect some sort of support for autonomous driving. But they also have to, strike the balance with that and safety. What do we know?
I mean, a lot of it is about working out how to approach new ethical questions, for example. Do you crash into a person or another car, or do you drive off a cliff yourself? You know, these kind of ideas. But also, like, trying to eliminate some of the legacy issues from old legislation. I heard, for example, that one problem with the screens you might have inside an autonomous vehicle, that is kind of forbidden in some parts of the country because of legislation from the 70s, which meant you couldn't watch a VCR in the car. There are these kind of issues which they've got to deal with, as well as the real futurology kind of thing.
I think the big point is this. We're kind of on the third phase here of this transportation revolution. First, we had kind of on-demand taxis, then we had ride-sharing, and there was no direction from the federal government, and it has been regulatory chaos in every city and state around the country. And what the Department of Transportation is going to say this week, you know, with some caveats, is that they see a lot of societal benefits to autonomous car research and rolling out these on-demand networks, and I think they're going to really advocate for research in this area, and they're going to basically direct, you know, states to come up with a coherent strategy to deal with it. And that's a lot different than the chaos that we have seen over the past few years.
Hopefully they are preempting that chaos, right? Brad Stone, our senior executive editor for Global Tech, Alex Webb, who covers Apple for us. Thank you both for stopping by. Another stock we are watching, shares of HTC surging 10% in Monday trading, the company's biggest gain since May. This after the company confirmed it is unveiling a new phone on Tuesday. It's believed the company will unveil its Desire 10 Pro and Desire 10 Lifestyle phones to go on sale toward the end of September. Coming up, how will the London tech scene cope if the UK leaves the single market? We'll sit down with the Deputy Mayor of London next. This is Bloomberg. One stock we are watching, Facebook. Citigroup analysts see the company's hot streak this year continuing, the firm raising its price target to $158, implying a more than 20% gain from current levels. This as analysts and investors have raised questions recently about Facebook's ad growth and competition from rival platforms like Snapchat. London has been working to convince international investors that it is open for business despite Brexit. But Friday, the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, admitted it was hard to see how the UK could keep its membership of the European single market and regain control over its borders. We caught up with the Deputy Mayor of London, Rajesh Agrawal, during his visit to New York, and I began by asking what the Mayor's office could do to make London more attractive to startups. Take a listen.
Well, you say that, but there is an increasing view, and there have been reports around it. A lot of research has been done that London actually ranked #1 place to do business, and even for startups, it is a very, very fantastic place to do it. Talking about the office space, I mean, incidentally, just this afternoon, the mayor and I were at the WeWork headquarters here in New York and had a chat with the founder, and he's announced 2 new centers, 2 new locations that they'll be opening in London. So there is a big change, a shift in sort of from the traditional office space into the shared co-location offices. So those sort of things are going to really make a big difference, and there are a lot of other areas in London. So it's not just the Zone 1 central London, but there's a lot of great areas in London which have got a lot of talent, great infrastructure, transportation, and we'll be focusing on some of those areas. We have to make sure, and the mayor has made it very clear that he's going to be the mayor for all Londoners. So we need to make sure that any growth of London is very inclusive.
What about larger U.S. tech companies? Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Alphabet, for example, has talked about how difficult it is to work in Europe because of the regulatory environment. How do you see Brexit impacting larger-scale U.S. technology companies?
Well, the regulations have been generally, by and large, quite different, and it affects sort of different firms in different way, of course, but generally speaking, the regulations have so far benefited, and it's regulators' job to a certain extent protect the consumers and make sure that the trade is happening in a fair way and there is fair competition. So of course it's going to affect different companies in different way, but by and large, London remains the best place in the world to do business.
On that note, what's your view on the EU Competition Commissioner's investigation into Apple? They've ordered Apple to pay $14.5 billion in unpaid taxes, and there's indications that this could start, that she could start targeting other U.S. tech companies, and she's meeting with the U.S. Treasury Secretary today.
Well, it's a matter for between Ireland and the EU. It's not something that I would comment on. But what I would say is this: is that any company, in the world must fully comply with the law and the regulations in the country that they are operating in, and it is important to realize and recognize that the taxes are paid in a very fair way because they go a long way in actually contributing to the growth of the country.
All right, Rajesh Agrawal, London Deputy Mayor, in town from London. Thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us.
Thank you.
Rajesh Agrawal there of London. Now to a story that is trending. Twitter wants its users to say more. The company unveiling a long-awaited change to its 140-character limit. As of today, photos, videos, GIFs, polls, and quote tweets will no longer count towards the standard limit. The change comes as Twitter encourages users to be more interactive with multimedia content. Last week, more than 2 million people watched its first live-stream NFL game on Thursday night. Also on investors' minds today, Twitter being sued by a shareholder who claims it misled investors on key growth metrics, specifically executives promising in November 2014 to boost monthly active users to 550 million in the, quote, intermediate term and to more than $1 billion in the longer term. The complaint alleges that Twitter failed to deliver on either estimate and concealed it had no basis for those projections. As of June 30th this year, the company had 313 million monthly active users, shares closing down nearly 4%. Tomorrow on Bloomberg, do not miss our interview with the newly named president of Brazil, Michael Temer, following the impeachment of his predecessor. That's at 5 a.m. New York time. And coming up, former Gilt Group Vice Chair Susan Lyne tells us what she believes is the biggest missed opportunity in venture capital: women. This is Bloomberg. Longtime media exec Susan Lyne spent more than 30 years in the business before transitioning to tech as CEO of Gilt Group, then going on to run AOL's Brand Group. Her next big endeavor to help bridge the gender gap in tech is president of BBG Ventures, an early-stage investment fund for women-led tech startups. I recently sat down with Lyne and asked her about BBG's goals. Take a listen.
We launched to see if we could take advantage of what is I think a missed opportunity by a lot of the venture world and invest in technology startups with at least one female founder.
Have you found that it is indeed a missed opportunity?
Yeah, I think it really is. We see, I will start by saying that we've seen over 1,000 companies since we launched 2 years ago. So the idea that there aren't enough women starting companies is just a misnomer, not true. But additionally, I think the range of companies and the approach female founders have, they are by nature problem solvers. So they start with some aspect of work life, home life that they think needs to be fixed, and they go at it. And so I think they bring a consumer point of view to the party from the start. They are not sitting in a dorm room or some office in Silicon Valley and just thinking, well, this would be cool if we built that.
So, you know, I'm curious, as someone who has worked in media for a very long time and then in tech, what do you think is unique about the women in tech problem? I mean, obviously women are underrepresented in a lot of industries and in leadership across the board, but what makes tech different, more challenging?
You know, I've asked myself this 100 times because when I started in the media business, you saw very few women in key roles, but that changed dramatically over a couple of decades. I think that it is partly because of the way Silicon Valley grew up and because of the kinds of startups. It's really about the way the computer industry developed. So the fact that early technology companies were really enterprise plays and they sold mostly to large technology corporations, that I think kept the world of startups pretty limited. It was all engineering majors, computer science majors, and it was a pretty small world. So I think it's understandable up to a point. What I still have a hard time with is why there hasn't been more of a change in the past 5 years or so.
What do you make of Walmart buying Jet.com for $3 billion? I mean, can anybody take on Amazon? Can a small startup succeed against that elephant in the world?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that Walmart's doing the right thing. You know, you can sit back and say they're unbeatable, or you can look for new models that obviously have traction and try to take advantage of that. And clearly, Jet, the founder, knows Amazon very well. His last company was bought by Amazon. I think he understands better than most people what the competition is like out there. But he's developed a concept that I think is actually new. And the idea of being able to buy with other people and get great deals as a result, they may be able to build a stunningly good business around that.
You worked at AOL for a long time. Built by Girls was funded by AOL.
Absolutely.
What do you think of Verizon buying Yahoo?
I think it's a great opportunity. I think scale matters in this world, and with Yahoo and AOL combined, you know, it is a mobile media behemoth, and I think a lot of the customers that AOL deals with on a regular basis, the brands, the advertisers, are excited about having a third option in that world. So I think it's great.
As someone who ran brands there for a long time, do you think the Yahoo brand can be revitalized? Can it have the cachet that it once had?
You know, I think it's less about the Yahoo brand overall, but Yahoo has brands that have massive traction and huge consumer love, whether it's Yahoo Finance or Yahoo Sports or Tumblr. And I think that that's really the way that AOL has been moving under Tim, is to really identify brands people love and to embrace them, support them, grow them. So I think you'll see a lot more of that with the Yahoo purchase.
That was BBG's founder and president, Susan Lyne. Well, 34 years ago today, now to this day in tech, in a posting on a Carnegie Mellon bulletin board, Professor Scott Fahlman posted the earliest known use of an emoticon. The message read, "I propose that the following character sequence for joke markers followed by a sideways smiley face." While this 1982 message was the first, emoticons didn't catch on until the 80s and 90s, and now, as we know, they are more popular and varied than ever, all thanks to Professor Fahlman. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg West. Tomorrow, we will pick up the conversation from Oracle World with co-CEO Safra Catz, 2:30 p.m. New York time. Also tomorrow, our interview with Nutonomy CEO. This is the self-driving car company that's testing a ride-hailing fleet on the streets of Singapore. That's all today from San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.
studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
We begin this evening with the presidential race. Donald Trump continues to gain ground on Hillary Clinton in the polls, even as he comes under fire for reigniting the controversy over President Obama's birth certificate. Joining me now is Bob Costa of the Washington Post. He interviewed Trump on Wednesday aboard his plane and writes about that conversation in today's Washington Post. Headline: Trump bullish on race as race tightens. I am pleased to have Bob Costa back on this program. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Here's what they said in Playbook this morning. Just when the narrative was shifting towards Hillary Clinton's return to the campaign trail, Donald Trump speaks. Washington Post Bob Costa, a great friend of Playbook, is driving the news cycle this morning. He spoke to Trump aboard his 757 as it idled on the tarmac at the Canton-Akron airport for an hour due to heavy traffic into LGA, LaGuardia. Trump's tie was loose. Fox News was on the big screen, and Jared Kushner, David Bossie, and Stephen Bannon were sitting nearby. There it is. There is the scene. Tell me what it was significant, and why did he tell you he wasn't going to speak out on the birther issue, and then this morning, he speaks out about it?
Trump's very confident at this moment, having covered him for quite some time. I've never seen him more bullish about his chances. He revels in looking at the poll numbers. But spending 10 hours with him, Charlie, on the campaign trail, I got the sense that this is still Donald Trump. This is still someone who's at the center of his campaign, running on his instincts. And when I heard Kellyanne Conway, his campaign manager, say about a week ago that Donald Trump now believes that President Obama was born in the United States, I thought to myself, that's quite a change in position. And so I simply asked in the course of a wide-ranging interview, what do you think of Conway's statement? Is it accurate? And Trump, we had a long exchange about it. He said he didn't want to engage on it. He said Conway can say whatever she wants to say. And I think it was indicative that this is still a candidate who comes out of that birther movement, who's a true outsider and doesn't follow the political rules.
Do you really believe he actually believed that Barack Obama was not born in the United States at any time? Or was it simply a campaign device?
I can't speak for what's in his heart or mind, but I think as a reporter, you've got to look at someone's actions. And I covered him heavily in 2011 and 2012 when he was mounting this birther crusade. And this was someone who was consumed by the issue. He was obsessed with it.
Because he cared about it, because he was consumed as what it might do for him politically?
In part, I'm sure it was a political stunt, a publicity stunt. But this is something that animated him personally. He's not driven by ideology, but he was, on this particular issue, just deeply interested, sending people to go investigate, looking into different things, conspiracy theories.
Then why did he change his mind, as he said today?
Well, he didn't have his mind changed, it seemed, on Wednesday night when we were speaking on that tarmac. But he's under immense political pressure from fellow Republicans, even from some of his campaign aides. In the final 8 weeks of this general election, can he appeal to those skeptical suburban voters, minority voters who he's trying to reach out to?
College-educated women in the suburbs
college-educated women.
A big deal.
Very big deal. And he is trying to make a pitch to African-American voters, Latino voters, these voters who have been wary of him for a long time. He was in Flint, Michigan, and elsewhere.
And African-American voters consider this a racist insult to the president and to them.
They take it personally. And I said to Trump, you recognize you're in Flint today, but a lot of these black voters you meet at the church and elsewhere, they see this issue as a cloud over you. And
You're trying to discredit the first African-American
his
president.
love of country, his credentials. And Trump glared at me and he said, no, it's a cloud over the reporters. He thinks the press is way too into this issue. But when you meet the voters, they care about it.
But still, I don't know why it changed. Are you saying it changed because of political pressure and he didn't really believe it? Or did some event cause him to say, I no longer believe, I'm no longer a birther. I no longer believe that the President of the United States was not born in the United States, even though he submitted his lengthy birth certificate.
He didn't take questions at the Trump Hotel in Washington.
Right.
He gave a 60-word statement, something approximately around that range, and that was it. He toured his hotel, didn't have anything more to say. I think Trump is driven, just based on my reporting, on the polls. He sees a winnable race.
And what has happened then? Let's talk about the polls, because I'll read you several things. Number one, this comes from Rich Lowry in the National Review. The National Review did not like Donald Trump, fair to say.
Not at all.
Exactly. You used to work there.
Sure. Movement conservatives, I've covered them for 8, 9 years. They can't stand Trump because they don't see an ideology there.
And here's what Rich Lowry, who's the editor-in-chief, isn't he, said. If you aren't seriously contemplating the biggest black swan event in American electoral history, you aren't paying attention. 15 months ago, Donald Trump was a reality television star with a spotty business record and a weird penchant for proclaiming he was on the verge of running for president. Now he is perhaps a few big breaks and a couple of sterling debate performances away from being elected the 45th president of the United States. Charles Krauthammer. Hillary sharpens, Trump softens. He's rising, she's falling. What's happened?
Some of it has to do with Secretary Clinton and perhaps her comments about deplorables, the handling of the health episode.
He calls that, Donald Trump calls that the biggest political mistake of the campaign.
He really did, and I think the reason he thinks that, based on our interview, was he sees his supporters as people disengaged from politics, and he thinks he can rouse them to the polls. This is a total outsider, someone who's outside of partisan lines. And when I was with him in Canton, and you see this crowd, it's electric. And these are working class, mostly white voters who aren't really Bush Republicans. They're not Romney Republicans, but they're out for Trump.
It's intoxicating for him, too, isn't it?
He loves it. He calls it a performance.
He does.
And he thinks of polls like he thinks of television ratings. Yeah. And he also thinks of things like a television producer. When he had his event today in Washington, he made sure to have Medal of Honor winners surround him. Yeah. He had 4 African-American supporters behind him at the lectern, and that all of the networks carried him live for about 20, 30 minutes before he finally made his terse statement.
When you look at the Obama constituency, which twice elected Barack Obama, they are in favor of Hillary Clinton. Yet at the same time, it's a neck-and-neck race.
It is. Well, her unfavorable ratings are very high. And I think sometimes it's not about Trump winning over voters. When you talk to top Republican strategists, especially those working on the Senate races, they say, look at the Bernie Sanders supporters, the millennials. It's not so much that Republicans need to win them over, just keep them home.
Just hope they don't vote. That's why when I talk to the Clinton strategists, I say, what's the biggest issue? And they say, turnout. They've got to turn out Democratic voters.
They do.
And Bernie Sanders voters were Democratic voters.
And that's why you saw Secretary Clinton seize on this issue. I published a story on Thursday night, and within an hour, Secretary Clinton is talking about the birther issue on the campaign trail.
I saw that, yeah.
Today in Washington, talking about the issue on Friday on the campaign trail, because she knows, to a group of African-American women, this issue gets the base out. Trump is intriguing.
It's her base out.
It's her base.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Democrats you speak to, they like her, they respect her, they understand the moment in history, but they're fatigued by the Obama years in a sense, really admire Obama and love Obama as voters, but they're fatigued by the political establishment and intrigued by Trump.
And she has trust issues, as everybody knows.
She does, and she's run this campaign against Trump based on temperament. But I think wrapping herself around the Obama administration, it's not so much the policies of Obama, it's the figure of Obama, what he means to many voters.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about the election, this is true apart from the candidates, President Obama's having, he's over 50% in approval ratings, yet the country is going in the wrong direction, gets more than 50% too.
That's the risk for the Clinton strategy, because the mood for change is out there when you're reporting. I mean, a lot of these voters, swing voters, want change, but President Obama remains very popular. So she's trying to latch herself onto that popularity, but she needs to also perhaps find a way to be the change agent.
He did not speak quickly in condemnation of Secretary Clinton when it was discovered, and we had the video, and she went home to rest for several days. For a day and a half, he didn't say anything. Finally, what he said was, could she stand up here for an hour like this? Who's influencing him not to say something, to take a kind of non-attack position while she was getting all that attention on her pneumonia?
Well, that was the most illuminating part of my full day with Trump.
I saw it, yes.
Who really has influence in this inner circle that's a mystery to most of the country? People don't know Steve Bannon, David Bossie, Jared Kushner. These names aren't on TV all the time. Kellyanne Conway, people know she's on television. But my sense is Steve Bannon, who ran Breitbart News, he's really kind of the soul of the Trump campaign. He frames himself as a populist nationalist, and he's latched himself onto Trump. He sees Trump as the horse that can bring his worldview to prominence and power in America, and he clicks with Trump personally. David Bossie, the longtime anti-Clinton investigator, operator, he's providing a lot of fodder for Trump. And then you have Kellyanne Conway, who's been a moderating influence in terms of tone, but in terms of policies and views, she's pretty conservative. But the thing that unites all of these new people is they get Trump as a New Yorker, as a businessman, in a way that Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, never did. But the other thing is, this is not...
Before we go to that,
sure.
Jared Kushner, too.
Kushner, very influential.
Who?
Son-in-law.
Ivanka's husband, a successful businessman.
He's the liaison. He's someone who shies away from the press. He's almost always off the record when you talk to him. But he's talking to businessmen. He's connecting Trump with donors. He connects people with Trump and people in Washington in a way that Governor Christie is in a similar way, and Newt Gingrich. But Jared Kushner is so close to Trump. He helps people who can't really get into that inner circle find their way in.
Is Ivanka, by definition, there?
She is, and she's becoming more of a spokesman, giving this speech on child care this week. And she is someone who he deeply respects and admires as a spokesman for his company and for now his campaign.
Here's what he said to you about his medical issues. I've done everything I've done. That's it. No more. All it was a letter from his doctor with a few records about his cholesterol. Am I right?
Very limited information.
Right.
And I pressed him on this. I said, this is a letter. Your doctor has had some controversy and some scrutiny for being a little different.
He wrote the letter while they were waiting outside.
That's right, the original letter. That's exactly right. And Trump defended the doctor, said he's very, very respected. But remember,
why is he trying to shut it down is the question, obviously. Saying this is it, and it wasn't much.
Well, I'm curious.
But also, she has a lot to give, too, as a matter of fact.
Sure. And she released a letter from her doctor. But I asked him point blank, Charlie, because I'm curious, as an American, as a reporter, have you ever had a major illness? Have you ever had a heart attack?
Right.
And he said no.
What else came out of this conversation you had that you thought significant?
Well, I think one of the most significant things is he sees this race in a different way than I think a couple months ago. What I mean by that is I pressed him on the idea of, will he form a media company if he loses the race? Because when you're in Washington, and I'm at the Capitol talking to senators and congressmen on background, and the chatter there is, what's this all about? If he loses, is it going to be starting something with Roger Ailes or another conservative media figure?
Breitbart and Roger Ailes.
Breitbart.
I mean,
Steve Bannon, who ran Breitbart. Right. There's been a lot of intrigue and question. But Trump pushed that aside, said it's a false rumor.
Said he really wants to be president.
He wants to be president.
But I believe that.
I believe it.
I think he wanted to be president for a while. It wasn't just 2 years ago that he decided he wanted to be president. But he wanted to be president when he raised the birth issue. There's no other explanation for me as to why he raised the birth issue than he wanted to somehow get involved in right politics within the Republican Party.
Well, I think that's, as a reporter, you can't assume that Trump doesn't want to be president.
Exactly. I mean, why would he not want to be? And he's intoxicated by the process.
Loves the process.
I mean, he clearly loves being out there.
I mean, he comes from the old New York tabloid school. As long as I'm in the headline and I'm in the newspaper.